Hello everyone, welcome back to my Darth Plagueis review series. We're on to chapter 17, almost forgot that then, and we got a little bit to go through. There's not a whole lot in the chapter, but it is quite a, let's say, complicated chapter to really get your head around. I think when I want to refer to James Luceno's writing improving style of writing improving a problem, I'm just going to call it a Lucenoism. I think that's just going to make it easier. I got no sketches for you today, unfortunately. But let's get into it. Before we do though, I want to kind of go over chapter 16 and that. I just realised why Palpatine was so upset at the Maladin. The Maladin, if she had killed One Heart, if she had done that, then the Jedi would have started investigation, and they might have been able to trace her, and they may have been able to break her and trace him back and trace her to a Saint Pestage, who could then have been traced back to Palpatine and of course ruin the Sith plan and set them back. But of course with the Maladin taken out herself, that it meant there was no way to lead it off to a Saint Pestage or Palpatine. And it also became apparent in this chapter that it was also another reason why they wanted One Heart to leave is Palpatine is that he could then manipulate him into having insight into the workings of the Jedi Order and how they work. While he gives him insight into the Senate and how that works. Then we get to Sereno. We cut to Sereno with Plagueis, and this is definitely the bit I'm going to spend the most time talking about. Don't be surprised if this turns out to be 40 minutes long or so. And there's a meeting surrounding the facts of, well, they want to open up a what was it? It was like a hyperwave repeater. Now, what's a hyperwave repeater? I think it is just, holograms, but that would send information and stuff. But it just doesn't really amount to anything. And we get to kind of see, and there are 3 Jedi there that participate in the conversation with Plagueis, and I do think Plagueis, you want to be referring back to chapter 15 for this, because remember when Plagueis had wanting to know much about Palpatine, like, tell me what your greatest fear is so I know how to best strengthen you. Tell me what you cherish most so I know what to deny from you. That bit. Well, in this case it would be, tell me what you believe so that I may challenge it. And, well, he doesn't need to be told what their belief is because he knows what the belief of the Jedi Order is. He is manipulating them. For conversation, I've put down conversation notes for the Jedi. So Qui-Gon is obviously suspicious of Palpatine, his exploitations and business practices. Plagueis' business exploitations and business practices, and he sees through Plagueis' justifications. Dooku is of course clearly at odds with the decisions of the Senate. We know that's a fact. We know Dooku often was at odds with them. And Sifo-Dyas is clearly pushing for creating peace, no matter the cost, for the good of the galaxy and ethics of the Jedi. Or, well, rather in the ethics of the Jedi. I should put that in there, shouldn't I? And he would be willing to fight and protect in the Jedi ethics if a war occurred. is clearly the most moved by Plagueis' hypothesis that he proposes. So on Plagueis, I think it's just better if I read throughout my simplification of the conversation to make it understandable. So if you've been struggling with trying to conceive what chapter 17 was even going on about with Plagueis and his conversation, hopefully this will provide some clarification of my personal view of what that was. So so this is what I've written. There is a sort of little summary at the end, so yeah. After Plagueis initiated the conversation, stating that pointless arguments are becoming too common. Plagueis initiated the conversation, stating that pointless arguments are becoming too common, and Dooku says the absence of a resolution means it will be the remote systems who will suffer. Because of course, if they can't come to a deal, there's nothing that will help. No one's benefiting. And he believes a hyperwave repeat, and Dooku believes a hyperwave repeater should have been a project the Republic took, and criticised the Republic's terrible decision to privatise the HoloNet. Qui-Gon begins his conversation asking if dissatisfaction, there we go, is the aim of the mask holdings, as they inflict it with the comments we're about to read. To it, Plagueis claims the contrary, that they don't inflict dissatisfaction, and that they advocate for the interests of neglected worlds where possible. So they support the interests of those worlds. Qui-Gon counteracts by saying that they use exploitative means to do so, such as the Trade Federation, and using its needs to inflate as it has a need to inflate its own prices or its own monetary gain, leading the world into Qui-Gon's words, to ruin. Plagueis says that the Trade Federation has helped to neglect his worlds, and has helped neglected worlds gradually prosper, but the fact that it comes with the cost of the Trade Federation and banking clan taking most of the profits, and they ignore the fact that they are being exploitative in that manner. Plagueis, however, is intentionally as we know though, Plagueis is intentionally creating this dissatisfaction. He's intentionally stirring up the world's frustrations that's not getting the profits it should, to make the Republic look worse. While we know the Trade Federation doesn't really have a direct connection to the Republic, we do know that they do see the Republic, that this would still affect the Republic. They are part of the Republic Senate, and the Republic Senate is negligent of these worlds. Now, Plagueis queries the Jedi, or asks the Jedi, about having to ignore ignore exploitations of the same magnitude when enforcing the Republic laws. So having to ignore things on the scale of, not getting what's just, I guess. That they must slowly prosper, and that those worlds must slowly prosper and stuff. But anyway, Plagueis queries the Jedi about having to ignore exploitations of the same magnitude when enforcing public laws. This is something I'm still struggling to get my head around. The actual wording in the book is, surely the Jedi have had to ignore consequences of the same magnitude in enforcing the laws of the Republic. And I find that to be just a complete Lucenoism. It really just, to me, doesn't make any sense in the slightest. If Luceno did better writing, rather, I don't want to say better, if he better worded it, then rather than using, what was it, ignore consequences, then it would have made more sense to me. But this is the part, that's the bit that still confuses me. Someone can probably figure it out, but I personally just can't. But anyway, Scytho says it is a misconception that they serve the Republic only, and that they serve for the greater good, or as we'll come to learn, their ethics. The greater good is their ethics. Now, Plagueis talks about how the Jedi have the advantage of acting in harmony, conjunction with the Force, and how Damask Holdings tries to look forward beyond the current situation, the future. Qui-Gon says the Jedi do the same, they look to the future, stating that many criminals have held Damask Holdings accountable for their actions. And Plagueis deflects this, saying the wealth are held to higher standards than the poor. Dooku blames the Senate for making the galaxy become aggressive to credit when, so they, you know, in this case, they justify their criminal actions because the Damask Holdings and of the sort aren't doing enough to help them and their finances. But anyway, Plagueis is willing to accept that the Muons have taken control of finance if Qui-Gon accepts the fact the Jedi have taken control of ethics. And in my belief, this means they are both wanting control, as Qui-Gon is unwilling and declares they are on different sides, but this is where it comes, which Plagueis rebukes, saying that they could be after the same thing, which is what I mean by they are both wanting control. Qui-Gon rebukes this statement, saying different paths to the same destination is a clever justification that he refuses to accept. And with that, Qui-Gon departs. Plagueis praises Qui-Gon's bluntness, saying that the Senate could learn from his bluntness. And Dooku says the Senate only listens to itself endlessly and without reason. And if Chancellor Darius is going to encourage an environment where injustice can occur, it will. Scytho says the Senate is something even the Jedi don't enter, but Plagueis mentions they have voted from time to time. He says that the Senate can be chaotic and disorganised, but one thing is certain: the core is not secure, and new leadership is needed. When possible replacements are brought up, Plagueis considers them possible to rise. Scytho mentions that they would not vote in any case. Plagueis mentions that Cal Pana would risk the survivability of the outer systems, as he would stand against the stealing, smuggling and slavery that many outer systems depend on to survive. Scytho says that they will need to find other means, and that judges... Scytho says they will need to find other means, and that the judges and Jedi will spread peace. And so this starts Plagueis onto his challenging of their beliefs, and he poses a series of hypothetical questions, and he poses a question to the Jedi, and he asks if dissatisfaction spreads and multi-system conflict occurs, with membered worlds of the Republic threatening to withdraw, would the Jedi's loyalties not be split? Scytho says that the Republic would be preserved, and Plagueis poses another question: what if the Republic's goals didn't stay in line with the greater good, and conflict arose to the point of them being divided? And when Scytho says that the Republic would be preserved, I think they mean they would stay aligned with the Republic. That's definitely how it's treated. Dooku mentions the absence of armies means there can be no war. Plagueis asks if the Jedi can become an army, should they have to. Sci-Fi mentions they were an army once, but now, no matter the extent of conflict, there was an attempt to forge peace without becoming a ruling body. Plagueis judged Sci-Fi as having a misguided sense of loyalty that prevented him from voicing the real extent of his anxiety and fear. Plagueis says forging peace sounds like they are right, but with further layers to their motive, I guess. Plagueis continues the dispute, asking what if the dissatisfied systems raised an army, and wouldn't the Jedi be forced to protect the Republic? Sci-Fi begins to ask where these armies would come from, beginning to say the Outer Rims lack the resources to do so, but he withdraws his statement. Eventually withdraws his statement before he can finish, as he's realising Plagueis' manipulation. And Plagueis brings forth that Sci-Fi is accepting to fighting, and he's willing to fight if he should do so, if there is a threat that needs to be stopped. Plagueis makes it clear he didn't mean to imply the Republic purposely deprived remote systems of the right of self-government, and that he merely speculates because he sees a growing threat. Dooku also sees it. Plagueis asks if the Jedi if they were attacked. Sorry, I should put that in there. If they were attacked, would they counter-attack? Dooku explains the Republic would remain demilitarized and would only amass an army if there was an instance. Would only amass an army if there was an instance, if aware of a threat. Palpatine's words echo in Plagueis' mind about the Jedi's vanity and blind obedience to the Republic could be exploited to make them seem like they are the enemies of peace and justice. Plagueis thinks of it in a new light, thinking he had taken the wrong approach on Kamino and thought it best to have the army engineered for fighting alongside the Jedi rather than against them. Sci-Fi says in fear of simplified manner that I put here, in fear of Plagueis thinking of investing into military project. He assures Plagueis that the Republic will not reverse its stance on demilitarization. His words were forceful, but with a lack of certainty. Plagueis assures Sci-Fi his questions weren't directed in motivation or profit, just that he doesn't want to see the Republic caught off guard, and places faith in the Jedi that an army can be amassed and raised if necessary. Lastly, Plagueis uses Sci-Fi's curiosity around raising an army to give him the idea of cloning one on Kamino. So in summary, Plagueis has tested the Actually, I'm going to read off my other summary ideas for it, which is basically the same, just a little bit more expansive. So Plagueis has tested the Jedi's views and how they would act in conflict, and it's becoming apparent to him that the Jedi are willing to allow more suffering in the claim of peace by stopping acts typically seen as evil or morally wrong, controlling ethics and in turn the galaxy through their beliefs, while not becoming a ruling body. And he cleverly manipulates the conversation to plant seeds of worry a war might break out. He's constantly throws in that these dissatisfied worlds, these worlds that are not satisfied with the Republic, they will eventually begin to fight back. And with that worry, plant seeds of worry a war might break out. That and Sifo-Dyas is proving to be the warrior of them all. So Plagueis plants the idea of a cloned army into his head once he echoes back to Palpatine's words of making the Jedi seem like the enemies of peace and justice. What better way to do that than to give the Jedi their very own army at their command in a war intended to destabilise the Republic and remote systems and waning trust in the Jedi's belief. So that is what I've taken away from the chapter. Now, honestly, I was so frustrated. That was the conversation in the chapter. I was so frustrated, not because the conversation wasn't interesting and that I didn't like the conversation. It's James Luceno. He's good. His writing was good for the most part in part 1, because there weren't as many scenes there that were of great importance, and I do mean great importance. But once he comes to needing to write scenes of great importance, once he comes round to doing that, but when he comes around to having to write scenes of great importance, he just falls flat, because his writing, he loves to use complicated words. He loves to use words you would never use in an actual conversation. At least in my opinion, he wasn't really use them, and it makes things that should be much clearer than they are become cryptic and just not and really thought-provoking in a way that comes from annoyance rather than interest, because you actually need to be thinking about, because you end up spending so much time trying to figure out what he's even trying to say in the chapter. And I, for a little bit, was actually completely under the belief that I wouldn't be able to understand what this chapter was going on about. I think I did a pretty good job in doing so, but I don't think I'm actually grasped the whole thing of it yet. I don't, and I'm sure there will be people who have different views on this chapter. So please go to the comments below. Tell me what your thoughts were on this chapter. I want to see other people's views of it, and the conversation Plagueis had with Diaz, Dooku and Jin. I want to know what your thoughts were on that conversation, what you thought the conversation was about. For me, this was Plagueis' way of testing the Jedi and finding out how best to exploit them. He's seen that the Jedi, they don't really serve peace, they serve their beliefs, and if people don't align themselves with that beliefs, they will suffer for it. This is basically what the chapter is, for me at least, saying. And we get to see that Plagueis is, of course, purposely also inflicting that dissatisfaction to weaken down the Republic, to weaken down the Republic, to make it disdained even more, so that the Sith can come in and be as ones of strength and satisfaction, who will provide that stability that the Republic lacks, and will help worlds and basically reform the galaxy into a much quote-unquote safer place. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and it's also thinking from the past chapters of what their intentions are. So anyway, thank you all for watching. I'm probably going to go through one more chapter today. This means I've pretty much reminded myself of chapter 5, and I've gone through 3 chapters if I do one more today. So yeah, anyway, thank you all for watching, and goodbye. I'm really happy I've got this burden off my chest with this chapter.